A circus manager is busy tidying his office when a scrawny little guy walks in the door. He walks over to the manager and he says, "Are you the boss here?" The manager says, "Yeah, what do you want?" He says, "I'd like to join the circus. I got an act." The guy says, "Oh yeah? Well, let me see what it is." So this little guy goes over to the center pole and he starts climbing up the pole, and he goes all the way up. He climbs up and up and up. He goes all the way up to the very peak of the big top. And he looks down, and he takes a deep breath, and he leaps off, and he starts flapping his arms, and he starts flying, and he flies all around the big top. He goes all the way around the place. He goes around the center pole. He goes loop-de-loop through the trapezes. Then he gets all the way up, and he takes a nosedive right down to the ground, flapping his arms like mad. And he lands right next to the boss, and he says, "Well, what do you think?" "That's all you do?" says the boss disdainfully. "Bird imitations?" A bush pilot drops Bob and Ted, two moose hunters, at a remote lake in northern Ontario. He tells them that he'll be back in a week, and warns them that his plane won't be able to take off with more than one moose. The next week he returns, and sure enough, the hunters have bagged two moose. The pilot tells them there's no way they can take off with the two moose. Ted says, "I don't know, the pilot last year took off with two moose." To which Bob adds, "Yeah, but maybe he wasn't a total coward." Not wanting to be outdone, the pilot loads up everything, and they start to move down the lake. The plane is gathering speed, but the pines on the shore are rapidly approaching. Finally, the plane gets airborne, but one wing clips the top of a tree, the plane spins, crashes into the trees, and breaks apart. Sometime later, Ted regains consciousness and begins searching for his buddy. He finds him, and when he wakes him up, Bob asks, "Do you have any idea where we are?" Ted replies, "I think about 200 yards further than last year." It was the 1930s, and a rich banker and his wife were having dinner at a very fine restaurant when this absolutely stunning young woman comes over to their table, gives the husband a big kiss, says she'll see him later, and walks away. His wife glares at him and says, "Who the heck was that?" "Oh," replies the husband sheepishly, "she's just my mistress." "Well, that's the last straw," says the wife. "I've had enough. I want a divorce." "I can understand that," replies her husband. "But remember, if we get a divorce, it will mean no more shopping trips to Paris, no more wintering in Barbados, no more summers in Tuscany, no more expensive cars in the garage, and no more yacht club. But the decision is yours." Just then, a mutual friend enters the restaurant with a gorgeous babe on his arm. "Who's that woman with Jim?" asks the wife. "That's his mistress," says her husband. His wife huffed. "Ours is prettier." An American couple decided to adopt a little German boy. After 2 years, the child doesn't speak, and his parents start to worry about him. After 3 years, he still has not spoken, and after 4 years, he has yet to utter a word. The American couple figure he is never going to speak, but he is still a lovely child, and on his next birthday, they threw him a party and made him a chocolate cake with orange icing. The parents are in the kitchen when the boy comes in and says, "Mother, father, I do not care for the orange icing on the chocolate cake." "My God," says his mother, "you can speak?" To which the German boy replies, "Of course." "How come you've never spoken before?" asks his father. "Well," says the boy, "up until now, everything has been satisfactory." A New York attorney representing a wealthy art collector called and asked to speak to his client. "Saul, I have some good news and I have some bad news." The art collector replied, "You know, I've had an awful day, Jack, so let's hear the good news first." The lawyer said, "Well, I met with your wife today, and she informed me that she has invested only $5,000 in 2 very nice pictures that she thinks will bring somewhere between $15 and $20 million, and I think she could be right." Saul replied enthusiastically, "Holy cow! Well done. My wife is a brilliant businesswoman, isn't she? You've just made my day. Now I know I can handle the bad news. What is it?" "The pictures are of you and your secretary." The police detectives were having trouble determining whether or not their suspects were guilty. They just couldn't get them to confess. After hearing word of a telepath who was able to determine if any person brought before him committed a crime, They decide to consult him. They bring the first suspect in, and instantly the man says, "This person has committed murder. He murdered a pizza man delivering to his house." Speechless, the police start to think this man is the real deal. "He has to be telling the truth," they say to each other. "We haven't told him anything about the case." They bring another suspect in, and instantly the man says, "This man is innocent and has committed no crimes. He was framed of burglary by his next-door neighbor, Bill Summers." The cops are dumbfounded. "How does he know? We haven't told him anything about the case." The cops are a bit skeptical and decide to make a little test. They bring in a beautiful woman they know to have not committed a felony. An officer enters the room with her, and instantly the man says, "This woman has committed theft." The officer, knowing this is a lie, tell the man, "We knew it. We brought her in to truly test your abilities, and clearly you're a fraud." They dismiss the woman. "I would catch up to her if I were you," says the man. "And why is that?" asks the officer. "Because she stole your wallet." A man starts his new job as the administrator of an insane asylum. While he is given his orientation, he was asked if he had any questions. "Yes, how do we know if a patient is ready to leave the asylum?" he asks. "Well," the director says, "we just ask them a simple question, and based on their response, determine if they need to stay longer." The director then calls up 3 patients for a demonstration. He asks the first one, "What is 6 times 6? The patient is shaking and nervously says, 1,000. The director shakes his head. "No, give this one 6 more months." He then turns to the next patient. This one jumps up and down and screams, "February!" "Oh God, no," says the director. "Another year for this one." Finally, he turns to the third patient, who looks at him calmly and says, "Well, the answer is obviously 36. "Yes," exclaims the director. "How did you know that?" "Easy. I just divided 1,000 by February." A nun was flying to Chicago. She went to the airport and sat down, waiting for her flight. She looked over in the corner and saw one of those weight machines that tells your fortune. So, she thought to herself, "I'll give it a try just to see what it tells me." She went over to the machine and put her nickel in, and out came a card that said, "You're a nun. You weigh 118 pounds, and you are going to Chicago, Illinois." She sat back down and thought about it. She told herself it probably tells everyone the same thing, but decided to try it again. She put her nickel in, and out came a card that read, "You're a nun. You weigh 118 pounds. You're going to Chicago, Illinois, and you're going to play a fiddle." The nun said to herself, "I know that's wrong. I have never played a musical instrument a day in my life." She sat back down. From out of nowhere, a cowboy came over and set his fiddle case down next to her. The nun picked up the fiddle and started playing beautiful music. Startled, she looked back at the machine and said, "This is incredible. I've got to try it again." Back to the machine she went, put her nickel in, and another card came out. It said, "You're a nun. You weigh 118 pounds. You're going to Chicago, Illinois, and you're going to break wind." Now the nun knew the machine was wrong. "I've never broken wind in public in my whole life." Just then, she tripped, fell off the scales, and broke wind. Stunned, she sat back down and looked at the machine. She said to herself, "This is truly unbelievable. I've got to try it one more time." She went back to the machine, put her nickel in, and collected the card. It said, "You're a nun. You weigh 118 pounds. You have fiddled and farted around and missed your flight to Chicago.